Hello there. Man, Wolf, you're always here. You're always like the first one to show up. Hello there. Man, you're a real one. Sorry, I haven't streamed in like a week or two. It's been a crazy week. Like, holy cow. How am I doing? I am glad it's Saturday. I had a really hard week of bounty hunting this week. Like, people love to get crazy around the 4th of July. Around any holiday, really. People love to get crazy, so I'm so sorry I haven't streamed lately, especially after the cliffhanger we left the last time on The Hobbit, which I intend to finish today. Did I watch anything new? I didn't watch anything new, but I rewatched Sicario last night with my dad, and I've already seen it, but I hadn't seen it in a while, and man, still such a intense film. Like, man, very intense. But yeah, oh, I watched a movie with my mom. It was I forget the name of the movie, but it was a movie with Keanu Reeves. He was a lawyer, and he was supposed to defend a kid who was accused of murdering his father. And the kid just didn't talk the entire time since he murdered his father until the trial. And so the lawyer had absolutely nothing to go on. That was a good movie. I recommend it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Figure out what movie that was. Dude, I have my keyboard somewhere else. I have it like set aside. Let me look it up on my phone. Let's see here. Oh, I gotta do my Duolingo today. Keanu Reeves lawyer movie. The Whole Truth. That's the name of it. It's named The Whole Truth, and it was released in 2016. Good movie, I recommend. I recently watched The Crow with Brandon Lee. It was good, and I'm ordering the comics. So yeah, and yesterday I watched the new Indiana Jones movie with my mom. That was fun. Some person I helped the other day said that they really liked the new Indiana Jones film, which surprised me because I pretty much, thought it was going to be terrible. I haven't heard anything except utter contempt for it, so I was convinced it was going to be awful. So one of these days I'll have to go watch it. I should watch the original 3 films first. Maybe Crystal Skull. I never actually saw Crystal Skull, but it's been years since I saw the original 3, so I'll have to brush up on those before I watch the new one. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with The Hobbit. We are going to finish The Hobbit today. I have my water here, ready to go. Take a swig before we get started. Opening it now. Alrighty then. Alrighty. Okay. So last time we left off, yeah, the ending was a good place to end the Indiana Jones movies. That's good to hear, because a lot of things have trouble just ending nowadays, so that's good to hear. Well, last time we read The Hobbit, we left off with Bilbo struggling to survive amidst the Battle of the Five Armies, and he was knocked out. With a stone hit his head. And now we find out what happened after that. So let's go ahead and read on. Oh, let me turn the music off. Okay. I really wish I had a stand here for the book. Chapter 18, The Return Journey. When Bilbo came to himself, he was literally by himself. He was lying on the flat stones of Ravenhill, and no one was near. Cloudless day, but cold, was broad above him. He was shaking and as chilled as stone, but his head burned with fire. "Now I wonder what has happened," he said to himself. "At any rate, I am not yet one of the fallen heroes, but I suppose there is still time enough for that." He sat up painfully. Looking into the valley, he could see no living goblins. After a while, as his head cleared up a little, he thought he could see elves moving in the rocks below. He rubbed his eyes. Surely there was a camp still in the plain some distance off, and there was a coming and going about the gate. Dwarves seemed to be busy removing the wall, but all was deadly still. There was no call and no echo of a song. Sorrow seemed to be in the air. "Victory after all, I suppose," he said, feeling his aching head. "Well, it seems a very gloomy business." Suddenly he was aware of a man climbing up and coming toward him. "Hello there," he called with a shaky voice. "Hello there. What news?" "What voice is it that speaks among the stones?" said the man, halting and peering about him, not far from where Bilbo sat. Then Bilbo remembered his ring. "Well, I'm blessed," said he. "This invisibility has its drawbacks after all. Otherwise, I suppose I might have spent a warm and comfortable night in bed." "It's me, Bilbo Baggins, companion of Thorin," he cried, hurriedly taking off the ring. "It is well that I have found you," said the man, striding forward. "You are needed, and we have looked for you long. You would have been numbered among the dead, who are many, if Gandalf the Wizard had not said that your voice was last heard in this place. I have been sent to look here for the last time. Are you much hurt?" "A nasty knock on the head, I think," said Bilbo. "I have a helm and a hard skull. All the same, I feel sick, and my legs are like straws." "I will carry you to the camp in the valley," said the man, and picked him lightly up. The man was swift and sure-footed. It was not long before Bilbo was set down before a tent in Dale, and there stood Gandalf, and his arm in a sling. Even the wizard had not escaped without a wound, and there were few unharmed in all the host. Hold on. What did your comment say? Uh, well, I don't, let's see. It looks like you delete. Does it look like some of those scenes in the movies, doesn't it look like they are going to kiss in some sense? Frodo and, Sam? A lot of people say that. I think it's, the reason people think that is because, there aren't many movies and stuff where two guys are just really good friends. And I know that's like a meme. Oh yeah, they're really good friends. No, they really are. Does it look like some? Yeah, I think like they're just closer than friends, but not romantically. They're like brothers. They've been through so much together. Um, it does irk me a bit when people like want to say, haha, they're gay. Not because I don't like gay people, you know, gay, bi, whatever you are, you're free to live as you want, and you know all that. But that's not what they were, you know. And it's like it's the same as when a person is constantly told you are this, and they are not that. It's like that. It's, you know, you wouldn't like someone doing that to you, and so I don't like it being done to characters which were clearly meant to not be that. But anyways, let's read on. When Gandalf saw Bilbo, he was delighted. "Baggins!" he exclaimed. "Well, I never! Alive after all! I am glad! I began to wonder if even your luck would see you through. A terrible business, and it nearly was disastrous. But other news can wait. Come," he said more gravely. "You are called for." And leading the Hobbit, he took him within the tent. "Hail Thorin," he said as he entered. "I have brought him." There indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield, wounded with many wounds, and his rent armor and notched axe were cast upon the floor. He looked up at Bilbo. He looked up as Bilbo came beside him. "Farewell, good thief," he said. I go now to the halls of waiting to sit beside my fathers until the world is renewed. Since I leave now all gold and silver and go where it is of little worth, I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate. Bilbo knelt on one knee, filled with sorrow. Farewell, King under the mountain, he said. This is a bitter adventure, if it must end so. Not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I am glad that I have shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves. No, said Thorin. There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell. Then Bilbo turned away, and he went by himself, and sat alone wrapped in a blanket, and whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. Indeed, it was long before he had the heart to make a joke again. A mercy it is, he said at last to himself, that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorin were living, but I am glad that we parted in kindness. You are a fool, Bilbo Baggins, and you made a great mess of that business with the stone. There was a battle, in spite of all your efforts to buy peace and quiet. But I suppose you can hardly be blamed for that. And I'm not saying it in a mean way. I mean saying it like you see the scenes with friends and laugh, not in a mean way, like you have watched the movies a lot of times and find it funny. I don't really find it funny. I find it, and don't worry, I know you're not being mean. I understand. I find it enviable, honestly, like to have a friend that you're that close with, like a brother in arms. I mean, to have a friend where your friendship is that deep and that close, honestly, I feel enviable of Frodo and Sam to have that deep of a relationship. I do wonder if it's possible to form a connection that strong without all the peril that they went through, you know. But anyway. All that had happened after he was stunned. Bilbo learned later, but it gave him more sorrow than joy, and he was now weary of his adventure. He was aching in his bones for the homeward journey. That, however, was a little delayed, so in the meantime I will tell something of events. The eagles had long had suspicion of the goblins mustering from their watchfulness the movements in the mountains could not be altogether hid. So they too had gathered in great numbers under the great eagle of the misty mountains, and at length, smelling battle from afar, they had come speeding down the gale in the nick of time. They it was who dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over precipices, or driving them down shrieking and bewildered among their foes. It was not long before they had freed the lonely mountain, and elves and men on either side of the valley could come at last to the help of the battle below. But even with the eagles, they were still outnumbered. In the last hour, Beorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns, and he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear and broke like a clap of thunder through the ring. The dwarves were making a stand still about their lords upon a low rounded hill. Then Beorn stooped and lifted Thorin, who had fallen pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled, so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard, and pulled down Bolg himself, and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins, and they fled in all directions, but weariness left their enemies with the coming of new hope, and they pursued them closely, and prevented most of them from escaping where they could. They drove many of them into the running river, and such as fled south or west they hunted into the marshes about the forest river, and there the greater part of the last fugitives perished, while those that came hardly to the wood elves' realm were there slain, or drawn in to die deep in the trackless dark of Mirkwood. Songs have said that 3 parts of the goblin warriors of the north perished on that day, and the mountains had peace for many a year. Victory had been assured before the fall of night, but the pursuit was still on foot, when Bilbo returned to the camp, and not many were in the valley save the more grievously wounded. "Where are the eagles?" he asked Gandalf that evening, as he lay wrapped in many warm blankets. "Some are on the hunt," said the wizard, "but most have gone back to their eyries. They would not stay here, and departed with the first light of morning. Dain has crowned their chief with gold, and sworn friendship with them forever." "I am sorry. I should have liked to see them again," said Bilbo sleepily. "Perhaps I shall see them on the way home. I suppose I shall be going home soon." "Soon as you like," said the wizard. Actually, it was some days before Bilbo really set out. They buried Thorin deep beneath the mountain, and Bard laid the Arkenstone upon his breast. "There let it lie till the mountain falls," he said. "May it bring good fortune to all his folk that dwell hereafter." Upon his tomb the Elven King then laid Orcrist, the elvish sword that had been taken from Thorin in captivity. It is said in songs that it gleamed ever in the dark if foes approached, and the fortress of the dwarves could not be taken by surprise. There now Dain, son of Nain, took up his abode, and he became king under the mountain. And in time many other dwarves gathered to his throne in the ancient halls. Of the 12 companions of Thorin, 10 remained. Fili and Kili had fallen defending him with the shield and body, for he was their mother's elder brother. The others remained with Dain, for Dain dealt his treasure well. There was, of course, no longer any question of dividing the hoard in such shares as had been planned, to Balin and Dwalin, and Dori and Nori and Ori, and Oin and Gloin, and Bifur and Bofur and Bombur, or to Bilbo. Yet a 14th share of all the silver and gold, wrought and unwrought, was given up to Bard, for Dain said, "We will honor the agreement of the dead, and he has now the Arkenstone in his keeping." Even a 14th share was wealth exceedingly great, greater than that of many mortal kings. From that treasure Bard sent much gold to the master of Lake Town, and he rewarded his followers and friends freely. To the Elven King he gave the emeralds of Gideon, such jewels as he most loved, which Dain had restored to him. To Bilbo he said, "This treasure is as much yours as it is mine, though old agreements cannot stand, since so many have a claim in its winning and defense. Yet even though you were willing to lay aside all your claim, I should wish that the words of Thorin, of which he repented, should not prove true, that we should give you little. I would reward you most richly of all." "Very kindly of you," said Bilbo. "But really, it is a relief to me. How on earth should I have got all that treasure home without war and murder all along the way? I don't know. I don't know what I should have done with it when I got home. I'm sure it is better in your hands." In the end, he would only take 2 small chests, one filled with silver and the other with gold, such as one strong pony could carry. "That will be quite as much as I can manage," said he. At last, the time came for him to say goodbye to his friends. "Farewell, Balin," he said, "and farewell, Dwalin, and farewell, Dori, Nori, Oin, Gloin, Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur. May your beards never grow thin." And turning toward the mountain, he added, Farewell, Thorin Oakenshield, and Fili and Kili. May your memory never fade. Then the dwarves bowed low before their gate, but words stuck in their throats. Goodbye and good luck, wherever you fare, said Balin at last. If you ever visit us again, when our halls are made fair once more, then the feast shall indeed be splendid. If ever you are passing my way, said Bilbo, don't wait to knock. Tea is at 4, but any of you are welcome at any time. Then he turned away. The elf host was on the march, and if it was sadly lessened... The elf host was on the march, and if it was sadly lessened, yet many were glad, for now the northern world would be merrier for many a long day. Dragon was dead, and the goblins overthrown, and their hearts looked forward after winter to a spring of joy. Gandalf and Bilbo rode behind the Elven King, and beside them strode Beorn, once again in man's shape, and he laughed and sang in a loud voice upon the road. So they went on until they drew near to the borders of Mirkwood, to the north of the place where the forest river ran out. Then they halted, for the wizard and Bilbo would not enter the wood, even though the king bade them stay a while in his halls. They had intended to go along the edge of the forest, and round its northern end in the waste that lay between it and the beginning of the Grey Mountains. It was a long and cheerless road, but now that the goblins were crushed, it seemed safer to them than the dreadful pathways under the trees. Moreover, Beorn was going that way too. Farewell, O Elven King, said Gandalf. Merry be the greenwood, while the world is yet young, and merry be all your folk. Farewell, O Gandalf, said the king. May you ever appear where you are most needed and least expected. The oftener you appear in my halls, the better shall I be pleased. I beg of you, said Bilbo, stammering and standing on one foot, to accept this gift. And he brought out a necklace of silver and pearls that Dain had given him at their parting. In what way have I earned such a gift, O Hobbit? Said the king. Well, I thought, don't you know, said Bilbo, rather confused, that some little return should be made for your hospitality. I mean, even a burglar has his feelings. I have drunk much of your wine and eaten much of your bread. I will take your gift, O Bilbo the Magnificent, said the king gravely, and I name you elf friend and blessed. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell. He had many hardships and adventures before he got back. The wild was still the wild, and there were many other things in it that in those days besides goblins. But he was well guided and well guarded. The wizard was with him, and Beorn for much of the way. He was never in great danger again. Anyway, by midwinter, Gandalf and Bilbo had come all the way back, along both edges of the forest, to the doors of Beorn's house, and there for a while they both stayed. Yuletide was warm and merry there, and men came from far and wide to feast at Beorn's bidding. The goblins of the Misty Mountains were now few and terrified, and hidden in the deepest holes they could find, and the wargs had vanished from the woods, so that men went abroad without fear. Beorn indeed became a great chief afterwards in those regions, and ruled a wide land between the mountains and the wood. And it is said that for many generations the men of his line had the power of taking bear's shape, and some were grim men and bad, but most were in heart like Beorn, if less in size and strength. In their day, the last goblins were hunted from the Misty Mountains, and a new peace came over the edge of the wild. It was spring, and a fair one with mild weathers and a bright sun. Before Bilbo and Gandalf took their leave at last of Beorn, and though he longed for home, Bilbo left with regret, for the flowers of the gardens of Beorn were in springtime no less marvelous than in high summer. At last they came up the long road and reached the very the very pass where the goblins had captured them before. But they came to that high point at morning, and looking backward, they saw a white sun shining over the outstretched lands. There behind lay Mirkwood, blue in the distance and darkly green at the nearer edge even in the spring. There far away was the lonely mountain on the edge of eyesight. On its highest peak, snow yet unmelted was gleaming pale. So comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their ending, said Bilbo, and he turned his back on his adventure. The Tookish part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. I wish now only to be in my own armchair, he said. Chapter 19. Wait, 19. Did I just read 18? Yeah, it was 18. Sorry. Yeah, chapter 18, and now we're on chapter 19. The last stage. It was on May the 1st that the two came back at last to the brink of the valley of Rivendell, where stood the last, or the first, homely house. Again it was evening. Their ponies were tired, especially the one that carried the baggage, and they all felt in need of rest. As they rode down the steep path, Bilbo heard the elves still singing in the trees, as if they had not stopped since he left. As soon as the riders came down into the lower glades of the wood, they burst into a song of much the same kind as before. This is something like it. The dragon is withered, his bones are now crumbled, his armor is shivered, his splendor is humbled. Though swords shall be rusted, and throne and crown perish, with strength that men trusted, and wealth that they cherish. Here grass is still growing, and leaves are yet swinging, the white water flowing, and elves are yet singing. Come, tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley. The stars are far brighter than gems without measure. The moon is far whiter than silver in treasure. The fire is more shining on hearth in the gloaming than gold won by mining, so why go a-roaming? Oh, tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley. Oh, where are you going so late in returning? The river is flowing, the stars are all burning. Oh, whither so laden, so sad and so dreary? Here, elf and elf maiden, now welcome the weary. With tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley. Tra-la-la-lolly, fa-la-la-lolly, fa-la. Then the elves of the valley came out and greeted them, and led them across the water to the house of Elrond. There a warm welcome was made them, and there were many eager ears that evening to hear the tale of their adventures. Gandalf it was who spoke, for Bilbo was fallen quiet and drowsy. Most of the tale he knew, for he had been in it, and he had himself told much of it to the wizard on their homeward way or in the house of Beorn, but every now and again he would open one eye and listen, when a part of the story which he did not yet know came in. It was in this way that he learned where Gandalf had been to, for he overheard the words of the wizard to Elrond. It appeared that Gandalf had been to a great council of the White Wizards, masters of lore and good magic, and that they had at last driven the necromancer from his dark hold in the south of Mirkwood. Ere long now, Gandalf was saying, the forest will grow somewhat more wholesome. The north will be freed from the horror for many long years, I hope. Yet I wish he were banished from the world. It would be well indeed, said Elrond, but I fear that will not come about in this age of the world, or for many after. When the tale of their journeyings was told, there were other tales, and yet more tales, tales of long ago, and tales of new things, and tales of no time at all, till Bilbo's head fell forward on his chest, and he snored comfortably in a corner. He woke to find himself in a white bed, and the moon shining through an open window. Below it, many elves were singing loud and clear on the banks of the stream. Sing, all ye joyful, now sing all together, the winds in the treetop, the winds in the heather. The stars are in blossom, the moon is in flower, and bright are the windows of night in her tower. Sorry. Sing all ye joyful, now sing all together. The wind's in the treetop, the wind's in the heather. The stars are in blossom, the moon is in flower, and bright are the windows of night in her tower. Dance all ye joyful, now dance all together. Soft is the grass, and let foot like a feather. The river is silver, the shadows are fleeting. Merry is Maytime, and merry our meeting. Sing we now softly, and dreams let us weave him. Wind him in slumber, and there let us leave him. The wanderer sleepeth, now soft be his pillow. Lullaby, lullaby, alder and willow. Sigh no more, pine, till the wind of the morn. Fall moon, dark be the land. Hush, hush, oak, ash, and thorn. Hushed be all water, till dawn is at hand. Well, merry people, said Bilbo, looking out, what time by the moon is this? Your lullaby would waken a drunken goblin, yet I thank you. And your snores would have waken a stone dragon, yet we thank you, they answered with laughter. It is drawing towards dawn, and you have slept now since the night's beginning. Tomorrow perhaps you will be cured of weariness. A little sleep does a great cure in the house of Elrond, said he, but I will take all the cure I can get. A second good night, fair friends. And with that he went back to bed and slept till morning. Weariness fell from him soon in that house, and he had many a merry jest and dance, early and late, with the elves of the valley, yet even that place could not long delay him now, and he thought always of his own home. After a week, therefore, he said farewell to Elrond. Giving him such small gifts as he would accept, he rode away with Gandalf. Even as they left the valley, the sky darkened in the west before them, and wind and rain came up to meet them. Merry is Maytime, said Bilbo as the rain beat into his face, but our back is to legends and we are coming home. I suppose this is the first taste of it. There is a long road yet, said Gandalf. But it is the last road, said Bilbo. They came to the river that marked the very edge of the borderland of the wild, and to the ford beneath the steep bank which you may remember. The water was swollen both with the melting of the snows and the approach of summer, and with the day-long rain, but they crossed with some difficulty, and pressed forward, and evening fell on the last stage of their journey. This was much as it had been before, except that the company was smaller and more silent. Also, this time there were no trolls. At each point on the road, Bilbo recalled the happenings and the words of a year ago. It seemed to him more like 10, so that, of course, he quickly noted the place where the pony had fallen in the river, and they had turned aside for their nasty adventure with Tom and Bert and Bill. Not far from the road, they found the gold of the trolls, which they had buried, still hidden and untouched. I have enough to last me my time, said Bilbo, when they had dug it up. You had better take this, Gandalf. I dare say you can find a use for it. Indeed I can, said the wizard. But share and share alike. You may find you have more needs than you expect. So they put the gold in bags and slung them on the ponies, who were not at all pleased about it. After that, their going was slower, for most of the time they walked. But the land was green and there was much grass through which the hobbit strolled along contentedly. He mopped his face with a red silk handkerchief. No, not a single one of his own had survived. He had borrowed this one from Elrond, for now June had brought summer, and the weather was bright and hot again. As all things come to an end, even this story, the day came at last when they were in sight of the country where Bilbo had been born and bred, where the shapes of the land and of the trees were as well known to him as his hands and toes. Coming to a rise, he could see his own hill in the distance, and he stopped suddenly and said, Roads go ever on and on, over rock and under tree, by caves where never sun has shone, by streams that never find the sea, over snow by winter sown, and through the merry flowers of June, over grass and over stone, and under mountains in the moon. Roads go ever on and on, under cloud and under star, Yet feet that wandering have gone, turn at last to home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known. Gandalf looked at him. "My dear Bilbo," he said, "something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were." And so they crossed the bridge and passed the mill by the river, and came back to Bilbo's own door. "Bless me! What's going on?" he cried. There was a great commotion, and people of all sorts, respectable and unrespectable, were thick round the door, and many were going in and out, not even wiping their feet on the map, as Bilbo had noticed with annoyance. If he was surprised, they were more surprised still. He had arrived back in the middle of an auction. There was a large notice in black and red hung on the gate, stating that on June the 22nd, Messrs. Grubb, and Burrows would sell by auction the effects of the late Bilbo Baggins, Esquire, of Bag End, Underhill, Hobbiton. Sale to commence at 10 o'clock sharp. It was now nearly lunchtime, and most of the things had already been sold for various prices, from next to nothing to old songs, as is not unusual at auctions. Bilbo's cousins, the Saxville Bagginses, were in fact busy measuring his rooms to see if their own furniture would fit. In short, Bilbo was presumed dead, and not everybody that said so was sorry to find the presumption wrong. The return of Mr. Bilbo Baggins created quite a disturbance, both under the hill and over the hill, and across the water. It was a great deal more than a 9 days' wonder. The legal brother indeed lasted for years. It was quite a long time before Mr. Baggins was in fact admitted to be alive again. The people who had not specially good bargains at the sale took a deal of convincing, and in the end, to save time, Bilbo had to buy back quite a lot of his own furniture. Many of his silver spoons mysteriously disappeared and were never accounted for. Personally, he suspected the Saxville Bagginses. On their side, they never admitted that the returned Baggins was genuine, and they were not on friendly terms with Bilbo ever after. They really had wanted to live in his nice hobbit hole so very much. Indeed, Bilbo found he had lost more than spoons. He had lost his reputation. It is true that forever after he remained an elf friend. It is true that forever after he remained an elf friend, and had the honor of dwarves, wizards, and all such folk as ever passed that way, but he was no longer quite respectable. He was, in fact, held by all the hobbits of the neighborhood to be queer, except by his nephews and nieces on the Took side, but even they were not encouraged in their friendship by their elders. I'm sorry to say he did not mind. He was quite content, and the sound of the kettle on his hearth was evermore after The sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever after more musical than it had been even in the quiet days before the unexpected party. His sword he hung over the mantelpiece. His coat of mail was arranged on a stand in the hall until he lent it to a museum. His gold and silver was largely spent in presents, both useful and extravagant, which to a certain extent accounts for the affection of his nephews and his nieces. His magic ring he kept a great secret, for he chiefly used it when unpleasant callers came. He took to writing poetry and visiting the elves, and though many shook their heads and touched their foreheads and said, "Poor old Baggins," and though few believed any of his tales, he remained very happy to the end of his days, and those were extraordinarily long. One autumn evening, some years after Bilbo was sitting in his study writing his memoirs, he thought of calling them There and Back Again, a Hobbit's Holiday, when there was a ring at the door. It was Gandalf and a dwarf, and the dwarf was actually Balin. Come in," said Bilbo, and soon they were settled in chairs by the fire. If Balin noticed that Mr. Baggins' waistcoat was more extensive, and had real gold buttons, Bilbo also noticed that Balin's beard was several inches longer, and his jeweled belt was of great magnificence. They fell to talking of their times together, of course, and Bilbo asked how things were going in the lands of the mountain. It seemed they were going very well. Bard had rebuilt the town of Indale, and men had gathered to him from the lake and from south and west, and all the valley had become tilled again and rich, and the desolation was now filled with birds and blossoms in spring, and fruit and feasting in autumn. And Lake Town was refounded, and was more prosperous than ever, and much wealth went up and down the running river. And there was friendship in those parts between the elves and dwarves and men. The old master had come to a bad end. Bard had given him much gold for the help of the lake people, but being of the kind that easily catches such disease, he fell under the dragon sickness, and took most of the gold, and fled with it, and died of starvation in the waste, deserted by his companions. Good lord. The new master is of wiser kind, said Balin, and very popular, for, of course, he gets most of the credit for the present prosperity. They are making songs which say that in his day the rivers run with gold. Then the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion, said Bilbo. Of course, said Gandalf. And why should not they prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you, but you are only quite a little fellow in the wide world, after all. Thank goodness, said Bilbo, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar. There's a nice little picture here of Bilbo in his hall, his house. He's just there smoking a pipe. Ah, that's the end. It says here, if you are interested in hobbits, you will learn a lot more about them in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Wow. Oh, cool. And they even put the first chapter of The Lord of the Rings in here to give you a little taste of what's to come. That's really cool. Wow. Well, what a nice ending. It was a little bittersweet towards the end, you know, the battle and Thorin and Fili and Kili, you know, dying, but at least they ended their time together on good terms. Well, that was a pleasant story. Very pleasant. I will say, I've heard people say that this book is among some of the best that they have ever read, ever. I wouldn't go that far. It's good. I like it. It's very nice. It's pleasant. It's fun. It is nice. It's not the best I've ever read. It's nice. It's pretty good. Very, very nice. This is the kind of book I feel like I'll read to my children when I have children someday. It is definitely a classic. This feels like a bona fide classic while reading it. Like, wow. Very, very interesting. I'm glad I finally finished it. I wonder if I should read Lord of the Rings. I don't think I will. I've been thinking, because I want to read these books on my own time, really, in my own comfort. I like reading them, and I like doing voices and whatnot, but I don't know. What if I thought, what about reading them just like on Twitter, like Twitter Spaces? Because it's just like, I don't want to like commit to setting up a stream for it. I don't know. I really liked it though. Really, really good book. I'm glad everything ended up everything ended up pretty well for Bilbo. Very, very majestic and very fairy tale like, because, you know, obviously this was meant to be a fairy tale. It's based off of fairy tales and just Tolkien's own world that he made up. Very cool, very neat. Very neat. I do wonder about his past books that came before this book, though. Oh, wait, no. This is the first one. Okay, so here's the thing. There are 4 stories that take place after The Hobbit, before The Lord of the Rings. So in between those books, there's Leaf by Nigel on fairy stories, Farmer Giles of Ham, and The Homecoming of Beorhtnoth. Or, excuse me, Beorhtnoth. Beorhtnoth? Then there's The Lord of the Rings, which includes all 3. Then there's The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. The Road Goes Ever On with Donald Swan. Not sure what that means. Smith of Wootton Major. And then there's a bunch of stuff that was post after Tolkien passed away. Lots of stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. Holy cow. So yeah. I do wonder if I want to read all that stuff or just skip to The Lord of the Rings. Because Lord of the Rings, if I remember correctly... Oh man, some of these pages are coming off. That's not good. What the heck? That's so weird. Oh, it's because when you open the book fully, the pages are stretched. Okay, I'll have to be more careful with that. Luckily, it's nothing from the actual story. It's just some pages that like show the different books that Tolkien has written. A picture of Smaug. A very simple picture of Smaug. But yeah, like, because I know that The Lord of the Rings was the main story he wanted to tell. The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, at least. And the other stories were there mainly to fill out the world and lore. So that, you know, he wouldn't have to explain as much in Lord of the Rings. So I do wonder about reading those books. Let's see. I do have some of these already. I of course have The Lord of the Rings. Let's see. I have the Silmarillion. I have Unfinished Tales. Huh, some of the ones that I have are not in here. I wonder why that is. Let me go look. Let me go get them real quick. If I could. Who they are. So these came in a collection called The Great Tales of Middle-earth. They are the Children of Húrin. Let me get back to the page where it shows the... Okay, so yeah, the Children of Húrin, that's written here. I have this one. Beren and Luthien. I didn't see that one anywhere here. I wonder why that is. And then The Fall of Gondolin, which, again, I don't see here. Curious. All 3 of them show that they've been written by Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien. That's very strange. I wonder why that is. Huh. Well, anyway. I do really wonder, do I want to go straight to The Lord of the Rings or read these other stories? Maybe if I look at these books and I see how long they are, maybe that will help make up my mind. Maybe these stories aren't terribly long like The Lord of the Rings. I remember I was talking to somebody and they said that The Hobbit is a long book. It's not really that long. I know it took me a long time to read, but really that's just because I'm not gonna lie, guys. I don't like having to sit in the same chair here and read the book to a microphone. It's I don't think it's for me. I like the comfort of being able to sit on my sofa and read the book in my own comfort in whatever way I want. And reading in my head, that's, man, reading to myself in my head, man. But yeah, really enjoyable story. I do recommend this book. It is a fun story. If you're looking for a fun, feel-good story, just a fun story, here you go. Here it is. I do say, if you like intrigue in your story, you like twists or character arcs or anything like that, I don't think this story is for you. There is a character arc in Bilbo. He becomes more adventurous toward the end, but honestly, that it's very predictable. You could tell it was going to happen, which isn't bad, you know. It's just really obvious. It's the obvious direction to go with him. Just a nice story to read. I guess this isn't a book I would just be poring over, you know, desperate to find out what happens next. It's all right. It's a book that you can end your day with. You can read a chapter from here and end your day like that. But yep, that is the end of The Hobbit. We finally finished it. That was really nice. Really, really nice. I'm glad we finally finished it. So now that I've finished this, I can finally get back to playing games. So I'm gonna get back to playing Dragon Quest. I'll do my best to stream more often. I say that every time. But I really do want to stream more. And now that this is the hardest part out of the way, I'm holding the book up and like moving it back and forth as if you can actually see me. But this is the hardest one out of the way. And I've already gotten several bigs in Dragon Quest. So yeah. There we go. Well, not much more to say. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care. Stay cool. It's in the summer and it's getting hot. If you live someplace that's hot, make sure you're getting enough water. Make sure you don't stay out too long. Make sure to have fun with your friends. I know it's summer vacation, so if any kids are listening to this, I doubt it. I doubt they listen to The Hobbits. Someone reading The Hobbit for an hour. I say an hour. It was like 48 minutes. Probably 45 if you don't count the intro. Anyways. Thank you all for listening. And I hope you have a wonderful night. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.